To me, Robert Altman's 1973 noir, detective noir, The Long Goodbye, is a detective story, just a movie to treasure. To me, this movie is a wonderful jazz riff, an era of just excellent jazz music for the last 20 years and still ongoing in the 1970s, a riff on the fabulous noirs that came out in the 40s and 50s, especially including the Raymond Chandler derived noirs, which this one is. This comes from a Chandler novel called The Long Goodbye. The screenplay was written originally by Lee Brackett, and yet it's given a full Altman treatment, a meandering and mumbly movie. That's the overtones of this movie. A camera that just absolutely wanders around everywhere. That could drive some viewers nuts, but it is a very novel or unique point of view. You don't see that, I don't see that in movies very often, where the camera just could go wherever it wants to. It seems loose and free, and yet unregulated or unfocused. And I think that loose, free, unregulated, unfocused feeling is part of the aesthetic of a detective story that's supposed to be, in a sense, linear, because you have a crime's committed, the detective's supposed to solve it, and then at the end the case is closed because it's been solved. But that unfocused feel is what this movie's about, a total riff on classic detective and noir movies. I'd like to read you Roger Ebert's great movie commentary on this very movie, and I kind of agree and kind of disagree with it, but I think he's dead right about some things, and I think this is helpful for those of you who haven't seen the movie. Ebert says, "The Long Goodbye should not be anybody's first film noir, nor their first Altman movie. Most of its effect comes from the way it pushes against the genre and the way Altman undermines the premise of all private eye movies, which is that the hero can walk down mean streets, see clearly, and tell right from wrong. The Man of Honor from 1953 is lost here in the hazy narcissism of 1973, and it's not all right with him." And so this movie, yes, it's coming out of 1953. Have you seen the Maltese Falcon or The Big Sleep? That's another Raymond Chandler derived story or movie. The Elliott Gould performance in here is definitely a take on an interpretation of the Philip Marlowe character from the Chandler novels. And it's different, and maybe even quite a bit different, from the Humphrey Bogart interpretation of earlier movies. I said it's mumbly and meandering. You could say that about the plot, which is really actually kind of hard to deduce or figure out once you get to the end of the movie. Given the style of Chandler and other great noir writers like Ross MacDonald, like 2 or 3 cases, they seem unrelated, and yet probably they're related. In a classic detective story, yes, like Sherlock Holmes, they would be related. But here, because the loose 1970s of uncertainty, doubt, ambiguity, maybe even postmodernism, you could say that that's what this movie is in relationship to its modernist detective fare, that the main character is trying to put the pieces together, maybe they don't fit. You have 2 people who die at the beginning of the movie, Terry Lennox, an associate or friend of Philip Marlowe, and his wife. Marlowe was brought into a police department and scolded and questioned and all that at the beginning of the movie. Then he's given another case, which is to find a man, Roger Wade, by the wife, Mrs. Wade, who's trying to find her husband. This Roger Wade character is played wonderfully, looks excellently by Sterling Hayden, who is doing fantastic work at this period of time, but is also a character from older noir fare. And then you have this gangster character, Augustino, who wants the money associated with Terry Lennox, and yet how do all these people and situations come together? And that's what Philip Marlowe needs to try to figure out. The movie is deliberately unclear, at least literally in terms of its lighting. This is one of the most naturalistically lit movies of an era where this is starting to happen more and more that I think I've ever seen. I mean, the daytime shots, I don't know that they have any lighting on set. This is so low lit, and compared to modern day movies, which are very low lit as well, this one still looks lower lit than even the low lit movies to me. At the beginning of the movie, you can even feel the meandering stuff. Before even this case I just described is wound up, you take 20 to 30 minutes to get there. Marlowe is woken up by his cat at 3 a.m. He goes out to find cat food for it. He sees these women who are his neighbors. They call him the best neighbor ever, but they are half naked. They are weird hippie types ladies in California. Who are they? Are they sirens, a la the story of the Odyssey? Or are they Garden of Eden, like Eve-like characters, Edenic characters? Probably both. And I find that this movie uses a lot of imagery or ideas perhaps or something like that from Alice Through the Looking Glass, that novel, the second book from Lewis Carroll, Alice story, because the cat comes into play in that book where Alice is led into the mirror world by the cat, like talking to her cat and so on. That's kind of what happens to Marlowe here. He's led to a mirror world, and numerous shots happen through glass or through mirrors. Marlowe is the man in the mirror all the time. He's looking at this warped mirror glass world, and a lot of wordplay, weird wordplay, like in Humpty Dumpty in Through the Looking Glass. Well, here he's called the Marlboro Man, and a lot of words are messed up or are misheard in this movie. I do think there are hints and tones of the Alice story here. I'm not sure there's an overlap. It might just be a faint illusion, but it's at least a rabbit trail some of you can go down and try to see if you can find more likenesses too. One of the ideas in this movie, I think, the thematic material is that paradise is always like right next to you, but the murder cases are taking precedence. A dark, seedy world of murders and robberies and so on. And yet, where's paradise? It's literally next door. It's the Eve-like women, half naked, dancing around, having nothing to do. What do these women do? I don't even know they have a job. They just do whatever they want to do. They're like a commune over there. That's Eve-like or Edenic-like. You have the ocean over there, always in the background of this movie, sound effect-wise, or even in the shots. And this movie even opens with Hollywood, the Hooray for Hollywood song, and a Hollywood sign in Marlowe's apartment. The movie ends with that song as well, and then Malibu, and all of these associations of glitter, glamour, paradise, Eden-like things are right there. This isn't like a movie like Brazil, where the idea of the tropical locale you want to escape to is so far off and you can't find it. There literally is an Eden right there, and Marlowe lives next door to these women. I think it's an interesting idea, even though Marlowe's trapped in this world of seediness, seduction, and murder. Now, you'll notice I've spoken mostly of the tones, the themes, and less about the plot, and I think that's deliberate because this is, as I said, a meandering movie. I disagree with what Ebert said. This is not a man of honor in this movie. What is honor, after all? There doesn't seem to be any. And hazy narcissism of 1973, I think that is absolutely right. I think a number of these characters are out, and this is Chandler stuff too, so it's coming out of the 30s and 40s. They're out for their own gain, out for their own selves. They don't know their world of loose associations. Friendship means very little. And so Marlowe's trying to figure this out. And when he loses his cat at the beginning, his lone friend, which is odd to have a pet or an animal as your lone friend and no human beings, I think that's a signal or tip-off that this is a world of total individuality gone haywire. And that may mean, I keep spinning this positively, that the women across the way from Marlowe are somehow this other signal, this anti-signal of anti-individualism, not against individualism, but they're a group who seem to enjoy each other's company, whereas everyone else in this movie is against each other, hurting each other. Lots of surprise violence in this movie. And so you have these sort of two worlds, and they're right next door to each other, but Marlowe can't get into the one across the way, which is the women or some kind of paradise ideal. I truly believe this movie should be used in some kind of class or some kind of a storyline, of a plot line of what the 20th century was about, how it developed, especially in the detective noir mystery genre. I mean, you should show, for example, The Maltese Falcon, The Big Sleep, and then at some point show this very movie, because here we're in a time and place where this movie and Arthur Penn's Night Moves are both sort of messing with the conventions of the detective noir genre, and can the detective really always solve the case? Is the detective always a super sleuth, or is he trapped, or is he naive? Is he a fool? You have that going on in this very movie. The undoing of the genre, or the reversing of some of its ideals and premises. And I think it's also happening at the same time in the Western, maybe also in science fiction. So you have, this is the time period where I think this is sort of a postmodernism. It's playful on the one hand, it's messing with genres, but then it's also undercutting some of their ideals that maybe have no transcendental moral foundation. And I think that's what's, if you watch the end of this movie, I actually feel that is the case, that the Marlowe character is involved in something shocking, and I have to think about it. And that's where I disagree with Ebert talking about the man of honor. Although you may agree with it, there may be a way to justify what Marlowe does in the end. I'd love to hear what you all think about this movie, so please do comment on this or say what you think about this movie. Subscribe to this channel for more great content. Thank you, and have a great day. This video is dedicated to my Discord users, Calafino and Linus Maximilian. Thank you for the suggestion. Thank you for supporting the channel. Thanks for your Discord participation.